And welcome to our webinar. My name is Malik Blue, and I'm the Senior Associate Dean for Study Abroad. And I always like to say that I have the distinct pleasure of being someone who works with students on campus, welcoming them, supporting them along their academic journey. But I also have the additional distinct pleasure of also nudging students to extend their Brown experience to another part of the world, which I think is a very special experience that really transforms student perspective. So again, work that I'm very excited and passionate about supporting. I'll turn it over to Adeline to briefly introduce herself, and then we'll invite Isha and Mia to do the same in just a moment.
Thank you, Malik. My name is Adeline Wong. As Malik has said, I'm the Director of Global Partnerships and Programs here at Brown. And what this means for you is that for all the Brown administered programs that you might have seen already in Exploring the Study Abroad website, that is run by my team. I oversee the team both here in Providence, as well as in 7 locations around the world where Brown administers some programs. Isha?
Hi, everyone. My name is Isha Kataria. I'm a senior at Brown. I'm studying applied math, economics, and biology. And I went abroad my junior spring, where I studied tropical ecology and conservation in Costa Rica.
Thanks, Isha. Mia?
Hi, I'm Mia Prausnitz-Weinbaum. I'm also a senior, and I study environmental studies. I went abroad my junior spring as well in Copenhagen, Denmark. And there I was doing environmental studies related things as well. Yeah, so excited.
Great. As Michaela alluded to a little earlier, we're going to hear more from Isha and Mia a little bit later in the presentation as we answer some questions that you had about the student experience. And I'll also pose some questions to them so that they can share some of their reflections about how it is that study abroad has informed, how it is that they're looking at the rest of their time at Brown, which unfortunately is only one more semester, and also thinking about how it might impact their careers and lives after Brown as well. And before I formally get started with the presentation, I did want to highlight that this presentation is really meant to orient you as family members to understand what this concept and idea of study abroad is, and how is it that students can effectively integrate this semester-long international experience as a part of their overall Brown journey. So you'll hear us talk about this idea of integration a number of times, and it's really meant to highlight the fact that study abroad we see as a part of the overall student experience here at Brown, and not as something that is aside. And you'll see that through as a through line throughout the presentation. So what to expect today? Again, we'll do an overview of study abroad at Brown. That'll include some data related to where students are participating in study abroad programs, how many programs we have, and the next and first steps that students might need to take to embark on that journey for study abroad. We'll talk a little bit about the benefits of study abroad. So why is it that a student might pursue this opportunity, and how does it enhance their skills and make them more marketable in the job market, as well as and looking at further education. We will spotlight a program. We will not be spotlighting Casa Cuba. We'll be highlighting another program. I forgot to update that piece. It'll be the Casa Melbourne program that we'll highlight. We'll also have a moment to share some reflections with Isha and Mia, as I referenced earlier, so that they can share a little bit about their lessons from abroad, and again, how that's impacting the way that they're looking at the future. We'll talk about next steps to start the process, and we'll round out with how it is that you, as a parent or supporter of a Brown student, might offer support to someone who's interested in starting the process of studying abroad. All right, so just as a snapshot of what study abroad participation looks like here at Brown, we're proud to say that over 20% of our students participate in semester or year-long study abroad experiences. And just for context, that's double the national average, which is about 10%. So we're really proud to say that study abroad is an integral part of the fabric of Brown, thinking about how global we are in our mindset. And we're excited to connect more and more students every semester to this opportunity. We have around 100 semester-long programs available to students across 45 countries. And of those, around 100 programs, 7 of those are administered by Brown. So those are the programs that Adeline directly oversees. And again, she'll share a little bit more about what the profile of a Brown administered program looks like. And we also have programs that are available both in the local language as well as in English, catering to the needs of students of varying language proficiencies. So I usually like to start off with a little bit of context of where our students are. So where in the world are our students? And based on where we are now, it's where will our students be for the spring 24 semester. So I've shared here a heat map infographic that represents where our students are studying abroad this upcoming spring semester. So we have over 300 students who will be studying abroad in the spring semester, which is very exciting. And they're headed to 32 different countries. Again, that's a high number of students. Overall, this academic year, we reached close to 500 students who are studying abroad, which again equates to just over 20% of the undergraduate population. So many students are engaging in this opportunity, and we're excited to continue to support them to integrate this as a part of their time at Brown. One of the other questions as students are starting the process is, what is it that I need to do to become eligible for study abroad? We like to reduce the barriers of entry as much as possible and facilitate the process. So the eligibility criteria are actually not that complicated. We just ask that students are in good academic and student conduct standing, which means that things at Brown are going well for them. We want to make sure that before we extend their time or their experience at Brown to another place, that things are solid here and they have a strong foundation. And as a part of that foundation, we also ask them to declare their concentration. So as you likely know, by semester 4, students are required to declare their concentrations. And we want to make sure that they know what they want to study to get to graduation so that as they are planning for study abroad, they can integrate that as a part of the plan. And then the only other eligibility criteria is not one that we place on students, but one the world places on us as it relates to travel documentation is, of course, the passport. So students need a passport, of course, to engage in study abroad opportunity. At its core, study abroad is an academic experience. And we want to highlight that because we know that there are some misnomers that some people describe study abroad as a vacation or a time that's a bit easier for them. And in some ways, admittedly, I think study abroad can be easier. But I think it's a lot more dynamic of an opportunity that poses other challenges that makes students have really formative experiences. So in terms of the academics, students, there are a number of different types of programs, which results in a number of different academic formats. So there's not this sort of one size fits all in terms of what students can expect in the classroom. So students can either attend a local university, be integrated into the local university system at a host university, or there are other models where students are at a study center, which is essentially study abroad students studying all together amongst themselves with students from a bunch of different other universities. And there are some programs that are a hybrid of both that involve students studying with locals as well as other study abroad students. The important piece about this being an academic experience is that study abroad is meant to help contribute to the progress of a student's degree. That's to say students are earning concentration credit and general credit that is going to contribute to their graduation requirements. So again, this idea that study abroad is something that might get in the way of on-time graduation, with thoughtful planning of choosing the right program that has and meets academic needs, the idea is that students should be able to move along and progress as planned as a part of their overall academic plan. Students are also able to participate in co-curricular and extracurricular activities while they're abroad, just as they are here on campus. So that can involve anything related to doing research at a local university or through their study abroad program. And then also to support, progress toward degree. There are some courses at Brown that are incredibly unique and students can't take elsewhere and maybe a part of their concentration. So what we do is we actually offer a number of remote accessible courses that students can take from wherever they are studying abroad so that they can satisfy that very specific degree requirement that can only be satisfied through Brown. So that's another option that's available to students. And that could be an independent study or just a standard course that's remote accessible. And as a part of the sort of academic integration of study abroad, we ask students to coordinate with their concentration advisors to confirm that their study abroad program works for their overall academic plan, so that they can be on pace for graduation, as I was saying before. We frequently get the question of when is the right time to go abroad. And the reality is there is no one right time to go abroad. It really depends on how much progress a student has made in their concentration, also when certain coursework is offered for their concentration. So there's an interplay between study abroad advising and academic advising here on campus that really confirms when the best time to study abroad is. So students can study abroad as early as their sophomore year if they declare their concentration early, or as late as their very, very last semester here with us on campus. So we're quite flexible with students to helping them find the right timing for their study abroad experience. Another aspect that's important as we consider when to study abroad is the idea that many study abroad programs don't align with the Brown academic calendar. Each program has its distinct calendar that's related to the sort of cadence of the host university or the study abroad program. So we have some programs that are spring programs that start as late as March and go all the way to July, for example. So as students are thinking about when works best for them, it's important for them to factor in summer plans, knowing that if you are participating in a sort of late start spring program, that a later start program, you would have to account for the fact that you probably couldn't do an internship back here in the US if that's the plan. So it's just a matter of finding the right academic calendar as well as you choose a program. Again, it's important to think about the sort of regions because certain regions of the world have different trends as it relates to when semesters happen. Another question that we frequently get is how do we make study abroad work from a financial perspective? So one of the things that we like to highlight is that from a starting point, we use the homeschool tuition model, which means that from a tuition perspective, the cost for study abroad is exactly the same as any semester on campus. And as a part of that homeschool tuition, students' financial aid packages and scholarships also travel exactly the same. The part of the budgeting and financial planning that is different, of course, is in the realm of cost of living. So as you think about the cost of living in Providence compared to Madrid, compared to Copenhagen, compared to Monteverde, Costa Rica, the cost of living is very different in different corners of the world. So as we work with students, we spend a lot of time with them, helping them put together reasonable budgets about how it is that their cost of attendance here in Providence compares to the cost of attendance when studying abroad. So truthfully, it does take a little bit of work for students to do that, but they have a lot of support from the study abroad advising team as well as financial aid to make sure that from a financial perspective, they have an understanding of what it is that they should be prepared for moving forward. There are certainly some situations in which the cost of living in a particular location is less expensive than Providence, in which case students will have excess funds to plan for, and that may include additional travel. But for other students, the cost of attendance might be more expensive based on the cost of living of their host location. And for those students, we spend a lot of time working with them on applying for external scholarships and finding ways to bridge the gap between the costs of attendance so that it still remains financially accessible. Regardless of students' financial profile, we believe that that study abroad is financially accessible. And for students that it's proving challenging for, we always ask them to come to us to share those doubts so that we can work with them to find resources to make study abroad happen for them. And one of the other pieces that's quite important for us as we're working with students is many times we talk about study abroad, we talk about the adventure aspect of it, the cultural aspect of it, the exploration of it all. And those are absolutely important aspects of the study abroad experience. But what we want to highlight as well is that there are tangible skill sets and skills that students develop as a part of their study abroad experience that ultimately make them more marketable in the future. So it's not this frivolous experience that students are engaging in and just traveling and having a bunch of fun. Yes, that's certainly a part of it, but there are concrete benefits to this experience. So when you think about language learning, when you think about interpersonal communication, intercultural communication, this idea of being able to engage with others across difference, these are all skills that are highly sought after in the job market. And we make sure that students are aware on the front end that they're going to have these benefits so that they see the value of these types of experiences. And not only that they see that, but they learn how to articulate that to an employer, or they know how to articulate that on a resume. They know how to articulate that in an interview when someone says, hey, I saw that you studied abroad in Barcelona. Tell me more about that. How does that impact your ability to engage with us in the office and do the work that we need to do? So I place this slide here as a placeholder to say that there are distinct benefits to study abroad that are important to note, and that these are things that are distinctly able to be achieved and developed as a part of a study abroad experience and may not necessarily happen in the same ways on campus. All right, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Adeline to talk a little bit about some CASA and Brown programs.
Thank you so much, Malik. And just reiterating all the great things that Malik had just ended that last slide on what students do with their study abroad experience. I will say that I meet many students on our sites that say, I would love to get a job here and all of that. And we're working actively on how we transition, from being on site to an alumni experience after that too. So happy to talk about that to any of you. Anyway, so for my part of the presentation, I thought I'd tell you a little bit about our programs that Brown administers. Currently, as you see on this slide, we have 7 programs that we administer directly. So we have 2 that are called the Brown In programs, Brown in Paris and Brown in Bologna. Both of these are immersive language programs, which really means that we expect a student to be fully speaking in the language of the country. And you'll find that a lot of our students go to these sites and feel like have no idea that some of our staff there are actually Americans or fluent English speakers because of that kind of immersive language space. We also have 5 programs that are run in a consortium with the Consortium Advanced Studies Abroad. Brown is actually the lead administrator of the Consortium of Advanced Studies Abroad. We have 12 other universities that we work with, namely Harvard, UPenn, Columbia, Cornell, Dartmouth, et cetera, et cetera. Obviously, we can send you more information on that. But what that means is that we have cohorts of students from all these 12 universities that are studying together. These are obviously universities that have high academic rigor and excellence, and we have expectations that when we run these sites, they run in accordance to the expectations of all 12 universities. So this is a challenging space, but it's also really interesting. And for these sites, we have them in Havana, Granada, Barcelona, Melbourne, and Dublin. I saw a question earlier about whether we have sites that don't require that high level of language requirement. So obviously Dublin and Melbourne are English-speaking sites, but we also have actually Granada, that is a site that is open to students of all language abilities, but they will be learning Spanish on site. Some things that I should say about Brown administered programs, all of our programs are distinct from in the way that we design and provide courses that are vetted and supported by our Brown faculty, both programmatically as well as academically. And we provide a community of peers and a rigorous program, which is focused on programming that allows students not just to stay with your study abroad cohort, to Malik's earlier point about different types of programming, whether you stay within a all-American study abroad cohort or you are directly enrolled in a university. Our programs are both. So you have 1 or 2 classes or experiences that are with your American cohorts, but by and large, we want you to get out there and experience the country and experience it and meet students and people of all walks of life from the space. We expect, obviously, that if you're going to be, for example, taking classes in Italian in the University of Bologna, which is our partner there, where you directly enroll, we expect you to speak fairly fluent Italian because, taking physics and English is hard enough. Taking physics and Italian is a whole different level of difficulty. So we really do ask that our students who get to site on some of these places have the language ability that is off the country. Next slide, please, Malik. So I thought today I wanted to highlight Casa Melbourne. I choose a different site every time. So I, as many of you will say, you play no favorites. They're all your children. And I play no favorites. The only reason I put Casa Melbourne on is because I just came back from that site and I'm so excited to tell you all about it. This is our newest site. It started, our first semester started this spring 23. So we're right now entering our third semester with Casa Melbourne. What's really interesting about this site is that it is a partnership between Brown University and the University of Melbourne to administer this site. And we have basically a staff team that are employed by the University of Melbourne that work really closely with us on our programming activities. So in our next slide, you can see some of the programming activities that we have. One thing that we are super excited about Melbourne is that the focus of this particular program is on the Native American and Indigenous studies, which some of you might already know. This is a growing area of interest here at Brown. And to Malik's point about extending Brown's interest and academic focus across around the world, this is where the Brown administered sites play a role, where we try to make sure that what we're teaching on campus extends. So our students who are taking Native American and Indigenous studies here will find that our orientation covers some of the topics and conversations that they have. So here, the first picture here on the left, for example, is actually part of our orientation that happened, I believe, this past fall, which is called a traditional smoking ceremony. And it sort of it brings students together with purpose and says, what are you here to do? And having experienced this myself this past fall, I can tell you that it's a deeply moving and engaging experience. And it really brings you to the present. Like, I'm not just here in Melbourne to learn about koalas and penguins and surfing. I'm really doing this to understand deeply what the sense of place is. In the middle picture here, you see sort of a gentleman with his back towards us. He is actually the head of what we call the Willen Center at the University of Melbourne, who is really leading the entire experience of understanding Indigenous ways in Australia. And here they are, I believe, learning how to make reeds, which is a traditional material that is used in there. Of course, I added a picture about the koala because that's what you expect me to do. But what I wanted to actually be more interested in is to point out what's behind. And we don't just go see koalas. We actually teach our students a lot about the culture and the environment of the space. So they're in sanctuaries. And what they really are talking about is environmental studies, cultural studies. Where does all this lead? So hopefully what I'm trying to convey here is that when we organize programming here at the Brown administered sites and what I call the Brown Global programs, we think really closely about what the Brown student is interested in, what our Brown faculty want our students to do, and then build our, not just the academic program, but the cultural co-curricular activities around that. If you can go to the next slide. Housing at Casa Melbourne, and I can talk about housing at any one of our sites, is actually a residence hall. In some of our other sites, we have homestays, we have sort of different hybrids of this. Melbourne is an interesting place for those of you who might have visited before. It's obviously a highly modern city. So you have, like, in the middle dorm, very nice, very fancy dorm, fancier than anything I've ever lived in. But you also have what I call the Hogwarts dorm, which our students have started going into. This is their Hogwarts dining room, which is literally what the director of the program of the house told me. And they basically all gather in, just as you see in Harry Potter at the beginning of the semester. They process. They have these big things. I'm waiting to hear about the sorting hat situation, but that's to be determined a bit later. On the far right, just a picture of some of the facilities. University of Melbourne is a massive university with some of the most advanced technology. Here you have the city architecture school. So they've sort of built with new materials, incorporating sort of indigenous ideas of design and light and all of that. So I thought that was really fascinating. These are all my own pictures, by the way, which is why I was so excited to show this to you. So that's Casa Melbourne in sort of a very quick summary. Obviously, I can tell you about any of the others as well. But I also saw that somebody was asking about summer abroad programs and anticipating your interest and many of your students' interests. We're also starting up global summer programs coming this summer. We have not run summer programs here at Brown globally since the pandemic for many reasons, obviously. But we're starting them up again this summer. They'll be offered as part of Brown's summer session. For those of you who are aware already, Brown has some summer session programs that typically have happened on campus, online, or hybrid in the summer. But what we're doing this semester is having them be faculty-led, Brown faculty-led programming with Brown coursework. So this is a course that has been approved. It's a Brown course. They get 1 full credit for it. We are offering different options based on what the students and the faculty can offer this summer. Some of them will have them traveling for 4 weeks. Some of them will have them traveling for 2 weeks. And you can find more details, obviously, on the website below. I know some of you will ask me about tuition and program fees. So summer session tuition is standard right now, and you can also see that on Summer Session's website. But also our program fees will differ based on where you're going. So really quickly, we have three coming up this summer to go to Chile, which deals a lot with art in the Americas, Italy about cinema in a global context, and about film and archival work as well. And to the Philippines for writing and nonfiction writing needs. For these 3 programs and for summer sessions, these are generally open to all. We actually have a good number of first-year students who are interested in this program, and we're happy to have them. There are no language requirements at this point for these 3. We just ask, again, that they have a valid passport so we can travel with them. And I'll stop there and happy to take questions later.
All right. Well, thank you, Adeline. That was very helpful. It's now time to hear directly from Mia and Isha a little bit more about their experiences. And I know a number of your questions were related to some of the programming that they've been engaged with. So without further ado, I'll ask you each to introduce yourselves briefly again, to share, where it is that you studied, how it is that you came to choose that particular program. And then perhaps we can start with a lesson that you learned from your study abroad experience, and then we'll go from there. Isha, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I can go first. Thanks, Malik. So yeah, hi everyone. I'm Isha Kataria. I'm studying applied math, economics, and biology at Brown. I went abroad my junior spring, and I studied tropical ecology and conservation in Monteverde, Costa Rica. I decided to pick this program because I was really looking for a unique and hands-on learning experience that I wouldn't be able to get elsewhere. So the program was a field program, a field studies program. So it had a big research component. It was also, I was in the rainforest a lot, hiking a lot, and it was just very hands-on. So that's basically why I chose that program, and it really added to my biology degree. And then one takeaway that I had, one lesson that I learned was definitely gained a pretty strong sense of independence, and through that also self-confidence, being put in a new country where you don't know anyone. It was the farthest I've ever been from my family, the longest time I've ever spent away from home. And so definitely through that, just learned a lot, and definitely I could say I feel a lot more independent and self-confident in myself. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Isha. Mia?
Hello again. I'm Mia. I study environmental studies, and I'm a senior at Brown. I went abroad my junior spring to Copenhagen, Denmark. And the reason I chose Copenhagen was, one, it didn't have a language requirement to go there, which was great for me because I haven't taken any languages at Brown. But once you get there, you do take Danish, which I was really excited about, finally getting a little language class into my college career. And yeah, a main takeaway for me, honestly, very similar, like independence. I felt like a big goal of mine going abroad was to learn how to explore on my own and like not always be relying on other people to have fun, since like I knew when I got there I wouldn't really know anyone. And so especially during those first few weeks, I learned how to enjoy my own company a little bit better, which was a goal of mine. So very glad to have had that experience.
Great, thank you. One of the questions that we frequently get that I think is helpful for us to share is how is it that your experience and your studies abroad impacted the way that you see your concentration? Has that changed at all? Were you taking coursework related to your concentration, or did you sort of take coursework that was just generally interesting to you?
I can start and then me if you want to go. But yeah, so all my coursework was related to ecology and conservation biology. So it directly um, added to my biology degree. So I got a lot of my requirements done from that. And so because it was so hands-on, I definitely got, I was learning directly about the plants and animals that we're seeing in the forest. We were hiking a lot. We were visiting biological research stations all over Costa Rica, really seeing how firsthand how research is done. And that at the end of my last month in Costa Rica, we did an independent research project of our own where we could pick any plant, any animal, any interaction, and ecology, and basically do our own, answer our own questions and come up with our own experiment. We ended up writing a paper and presenting it in a symposium type of format. So that was definitely something that really, really did add to how I see my concentration and how I also learned biology. And that was something that was really valuable to me.
Thanks, Isha. What about you, Mia?
Yeah, a few things come to mind. Being in Denmark as an environmental studies major was really interesting because they just like have a huge focus on like sustainability. Like from my apartment, I could like see all these windmills that are like generating electricity for the country. So just like learning about like ways to be sustainable in a place that like is actually doing these things, and it's not just like being talked about without like as much action as like it feels like it is in the United States. So yeah, getting that like Denmark perspective on sustainability. And then also with my course, one of my courses I was taking, I traveled to Iceland with my study abroad program, and we got to see glaciers there and learn about the glaciers, and also like hear from locals their experiences with the glaciers and how sad they were that they are quickly melting away. And so that was just like, that was a pretty intense, like real moment of like, just like seeing climate change, which I hadn't really experienced before at Brown.
I think that's a really good point, Mia. One of the aspects of study abroad that we like to highlight is that a lot of the programming associated with study abroad is experiential, right? So these concepts and things that you've been exposed to in the classroom here at Brown are now things that you're able to see in person, ask people how it is that they're reacting to it in real time, which is something that's really palpable and powerful. So that's one of the favorite aspects of study abroad that I always appreciate hearing students share, those reflections of how it is that the theory comes into connection in practice and real life engagement. One of the other questions that folks like to ask is thinking about the journey of program discovery. So Mia and Isha, as you think about rewinding in time before you knew where you wanted to study abroad, how did you start the process of figuring out where and what you wanted to do with your study abroad experience, what that process looked like and how you worked with advisors to figure it all out?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, basically I narrowed it down because I was only familiar with English and Spanish. So those were kind of the countries I started looking at. I talked to a study abroad advisor, and we went through some of the program options. At the end of the day, I kind of really knew I wanted a unique experience that I couldn't really get anywhere else. So I wanted more than just going to a university abroad and taking classes there. I really wanted something unique and very hands-on. And I know I also wanted something outdoors. I wanted to take a moment, to really enjoy that and have that aspect. And so with that, I worked with a study abroad advisor to narrow a few options down. And then from there, it was also working with my academic advisor, my concentration advisor, to figure out, looking at classes, how can this align with my degree and my degree requirements, and what would that look like? So it was basically a mixture of collaborating with my study abroad advisor as well as my concentration advisor to kind of ended up picking this program.
Great. Thanks, Isha. What about you, Mia?
Yeah, mine was definitely similar. I started with like language and major as like my kind of parameters. So I knew that I needed to go somewhere that didn't have a language requirement, and I wanted it to have a strong environmental science, environmental studies program. So I also talked to a study abroad advisor, and we ended up narrowing it down to 5 programs. And then I just checked out the website for each of those, and Copenhagen, the DIS program that I did, really caught my eye because of it has like included these study tours, is what they call them, such as my trip I talked about to Iceland. And they also have really great housing options. So just like looking at all the different websites, this one just stood out to me the most. And I also was just really drawn in by Copenhagen as a city. As you can see in my photo here, like there's some beautiful architecture. It's a great city.
Thank you. The way that I typically describe the program discovery process for study abroad is that it's quite similar to the college search process, right? A student has an idea of the sort of profile of experience that they're hoping to have, what community looks like, what the city looks like, and all of these factors that come into play. In the same way with the college search process, there are some trade-offs, right? If you choose to come to Brown and not this other university, there's things that you gain, but also perhaps things that you lose, or not you won't be able to take advantage of just based on the profile of what the university is able to offer. So we always frame it in this idea of trade-offs, and you're not going to find the quote unquote perfect program necessarily, but it's a matter of figuring out what your priorities are and how it is that you rank those, right? What's the most important to you? Is it housing? Is it academic alignment? Is it the fact that there's one other person that you know and there's this level of comfort? Those are the types of conversations that we have with students as we sort of are helping them work through the application process through advising. One of the other questions that is going to be super relevant for this group of people is I'm wondering if you could share with us what your relationship with your family was as a part of this process. So even in the program discovery research process, as well as while you were abroad, what was the dynamic like with your family? And then as a secondary question, I'm happy to repeat this, did the expectations of that dynamic between you and your family align?
Yeah, do you want to go first on this one?
Sure. Well, I feel like since coming to college, like my family has been like allowed me to be like pretty independent, like choosing my major, choosing where I want to live, things like that. So it was kind of the same when it came to study abroad. So I kind of like did most of the like first exploratory research of where I might want to go on my own. And then I think once I had it narrowed down to those 5 options, I discussed with my family, and just made sure it all sounded good with them, which it did. And then one hard part about being in Denmark was there's a 5-hour time difference, which made it a little more difficult to like plan calls and like stay in touch. But we still did, me and my family called about every week. And then I was lucky enough that they could visit me in Denmark, which was really cool. They got to see kind of what my daily life looked like over there. Yeah, different expectations. I don't think I really had an issue with differences in expectations, but I could see how that could happen, especially when there's like a time difference and it's just more difficult to stay in touch.
Absolutely. Thanks, Mia. Isha, what about for you?
Yeah, I think I had a pretty similar experience, especially in the beginning with the exploratory research and finding a program. It was pretty much independent. Like I had presented to my parents, like I wanted to do this program, basically just told them and they were okay with it. And then while I was on the program, I didn't have to deal with much of a time difference, but here at Brown, I'm used to calling back home, calling my mom. She likes me to call her like every day, but that is obviously different when I was abroad just because, I was traveling. A lot of the times I didn't have service. And so that was different. And I think the way we kind of handled that was, again, just through discussion and like, I'm going to try to call you as much as I can and with however much time I do have. But again, it changed. And yeah, other than that, it was like pretty smooth. And yeah.
Great. Thank you for sharing that. The reason why I like to ask questions about family dynamics is because it looks very different for different students. And believe it or not, that really has an impact on how it is that students navigate the process. As we engage with our students as they're preparing for study abroad, we really highlight how independent so much of the process is, right? You're having to apply for a visa. Once you arrive, there's an element of having to figure out a new public transportation system. And these are all things that if you called back home and asked about, your parents are likely not going to have the answers to. So we try to help students build those skills to be able to independently navigate that process. So we actually do have a web page that talks about the dynamic that we're hoping that families have with their student and ways that you can support them, because we know that it can be challenging to let go of the reins a little bit and let students have that independence, especially if it's them going to a country that they don't speak the language, they've never been to. We understand that that's scary. But what we want to highlight is that students are not left to their own devices throughout the process, that there's a team of advisors to support them both here at Brown and Providence, but also when they arrive on site, there's a robust support system that's available to them. So trust and believe that students are not left to figure it all out on their own, but we do encourage them to do some of the work because we know that there is a lot of learning that happens through that work. So I want to take a little moment to thank Isha and Mia for sharing their perspectives. That's the last question that we'll take that's specifically to them, but we'll generally open it up to other Q&A questions. So if you want to continue to have those popped in the chat, and then we'll sort of alternate in our responses to who's going to answer. And I know that there are a number in the chat still, so we're working on those still, just trying to make sure that we're staying engaged in the video format as well.
Malik, I can pick out a few for you. We had, housing is always top of the list on parent and family topics of interest. So we had a couple on housing that I'll direct to you. One was, how is housing back here at Brown handled when a student goes abroad for the semester? Is their room put on hold? Will they have the same roommate? How have you found that experience?
So the process does vary slightly based on which semester you're going abroad. So housing on campus is done for the academic year. So if you are a student who's studying abroad in the spring, for example, you already have your full assignment for the academic year. And essentially what you do is you communicate to Residential Life that you are studying abroad, and they'll relinquish you from your spring assignment. And then they'll sort of work with the roommates, if you're in a roommate situation, to backfill that space. Now, if you're a student who is returning for the fall semester, the process works. I'm sorry, if you're returning for the spring semester, so that means you studied abroad in the fall, you're coming back in the spring, Res Life will reach out to you probably around midpoint in the fall semester, I would say in November, to ask you what your preferences are. And if you have a friend that has a vacancy, you can make that request to be slotted in with that individual. But largely for students who are returning from fall study abroad to come to campus in the spring, they are slotted into what's left available based on vacancies from students departing in the spring. But there is an element of preference that goes into the process. It's just a little bit less robust than the overall process for placing students for the full academic year.
Thank you. And then a question about housing in the program where they're studying abroad. So are there already housing arrangements that Brown's worked out or these programs have worked out, or are students responsible for finding their own place to live when they go study abroad?
It depends on the program. So there are some programs like Brown and CASA programs where the program itself will source the housing. Usually that will involve doing some sort of survey to share what your preferences are. And then there's a housing placement. In other programs, these are typically direct enroll programs. So programs where students are really putting on the hat of a local student for the semester. Those types of programs, there's usually some resourcing related to here's some guidance offered by the host institution for doing a housing search, but ultimately it is the student's responsibility for those types of programs to source the housing, of course, with guidance from their host institution. So as we were talking about the different priorities, if you have a student who is not very comfortable navigating new cultural housing environments, which that's probably many students, that's a factor to take into consideration. How comfortable are you sourcing your own housing and working through a different system? So that also comes into play when students are choosing programs as well.
Okay, thank you. And let's segue a little bit over to health and safety. We had a question that came in through the registration about dietary specific needs when a student's traveling to another country. How do you work with the program or dietary folks here at Brown to accommodate those needs?
Absolutely. So one of the things that we tell students as a part of the advising process, if you have any sort of accommodation needs, whether it's related to mobility, whether it's related to some sort of ailment, or dietary restrictions, it's really important to disclose that to your study abroad advisor as soon as possible so that that can be taken into account as a part of your program selection process even. So the resourcing available really varies based on program. So I'll talk about the Brown and CASA programs where there's a robust on-site staff presence. They're there to support navigating some of these questions and supporting students and figuring out how to get their dietary needs or other accommodations met. For direct enroll programs, there's a little bit more onus on the student to navigate that independently, but in those situations, we encourage students to work very closely with our advising team to navigate that. I'm someone who has a food allergy, a severe food allergy, and I travel quite frequently sometimes to places I don't speak the language. So I understand what it's like to not necessarily have the confidence that folks understand the importance of getting it right as it relates to dietary restrictions. So those are questions and conversations that we ask students to bring to the study abroad advising team so that we can have a specific conversation about what it is that their need is, what the concern is, and how it is that we might be able to make sure that you can have a safe experience considering your accommodation need or your dietary restrictions or wherever it may be.
Thank you. And then this question is a little bit of a turn when we have such an exciting, fun topic. Obviously, there are places in the world that aren't safe to travel to or may have been safe and then become unsafe. How does Brown address security and safety of students when they're abroad?
Absolutely. So we actually have a director of international travel risk management whose full-time job is to keep a pulse on what's going on in the world. And as a part of that role, they rely on resources related to health, safety, and security that update us regularly on things that happen. So, for example, if there's a natural disaster somewhere, this person gets pinged and we'll coordinate to make sure if we have any students there, we're reaching out to them and contacting their program provider to confirm that students are safe and healthy. And the same goes if we don't have students there, but we have a program that's meant to be there in the future. So we have a committee of folks, the Global Travel Risk Assessment Committee that comes together to make assessments, really leaning on the Department of State to say whether or not it's safe to have folks affiliated with the US traveling to a particular location. And we saw this happen during COVID. Every study abroad office saw this when the onset of COVID. If and when conditions change to a situation in which we don't believe it's safe for students to be there, we have resourcing to make sure that we can repatriate students and bring them back home. And in a lot of ways, the work that we do as it relates to international risk management is really related to responsiveness, keeping a pulse on what's going on. And when decisions need to be made to bring students back, we communicate that both to students and emergency contacts, and we'll facilitate that process.
Great, thank you. We have a request in the chat. If you could go back to that slide where you had everyone listed, the different places that they're going. And well, if you could do that, I'll go to Adeline for a few questions about the CASA programs. Adeline, can you talk about the competitiveness of the CASA programs? How difficult is it for a student to get accepted to one of those programs?
I would say it is moderately competitive, but because I work really closely with Malik, we really try to accommodate as many students as we can. I will tell you, for example, when I first started here, our Barcelona program really only took 45 students. But as we grew, as the demand grew and grew and grew, I've worked with my team to expand the ability for us to take in more. So this spring, I have 62 students right now in Barcelona. And what we want to do is make sure that we expand to a point that we do not compromise on the academic offerings of our programs. So we can't do it in every site, but we try our very best to do so.
Thank you. Now, speaking of Barcelona, somebody had a question. Are there programs outside the CASA program at Brown that students can choose in Barcelona, or do they have to be part of CASA if they go to Barcelona?
Why? I'm going to defer to Malik to answer that. I am
Okay.
obviously.
Obviously, they should go to the Brown program, right?
Yes. So the short and sweet answer is no asterisk. So no, students are not able to go to programs that are outside of our approved portfolio. So in Barcelona right now, the only approved program is the Casa Barcelona program. And that's because we believe that the vast majority of student needs are met through that particular program. We do have a pathway for students to petition for a non-approved program to be approved for their particular situation. But that petition really has to be rooted in an academic rationale. So a student has to come to us and say, this very specific academic need that I have cannot be accommodated on your program, and I'd like to petition that. And we see a few successful petitions each semester. So if it's for an academic reason, not just I want to be in a different part of the city or some other logistical or personal reason, we consider academic rationale as a part of the petition process solely.
Great, thank you. Another housing question. Does financial aid that you spoke of that travels with the student, does that cover housing as well, or just tuition abroad?
So the response to that is yes, asterisk. So if a student receives aid that typically applies to non-tuition costs, they'll still receive that same dollar amount. However, the thing to take into consideration, and as I was alluding to earlier, is the cost of living. So if, for example, housing on campus per semester costs $5,000, and that's typically covered by university scholarship of $5,000, that $5,000 amount is going to remain the same, whether housing abroad is more or less. If it's less, then there's excess funds that students are able to use at their own discretion. If it's more, that's when we get into the mode of figuring out how it is that we can navigate other resources to support students to bridge that gap, largely through external scholarships.
Thank you. And we are nearing the end of our time. So we got questions specifically about students who are engineering majors, students who are computer science majors, students who have an international studies concentration. And so many folks are asking about specific programs that fit well with these different concentrations. How can parents learn more? What's the best advice for students to get started in looking at that? And what's the timeline? Are they too late for the next semester? Where would they be in that study abroad schedule?
Absolutely. So to answer generally, if there are unanswered questions, which I know there will be based on the time, you can certainly send those questions to our general inbox studyabroad@brown.edu, and we'll get back to you from that perspective. One of the things that I'll show very quickly, and if you want to take a screenshot of this, it'll be helpful, is our upcoming deadlines. So in terms of timeline, the next application cycle that's available is our fall 24 cycle. So students are actively applying for fall 24 programs. And then the next cycle for spring 25 will open up at the end of this spring semester. And that's the typical cadence. Students should be meeting with us at the very early part of the semester prior to when they're hoping to study abroad.
Great, thank you. So